Welcome back to another episode, everybody. It's been a while since we've done this. Wait, what's our show again?
Just two camera guys.
My name's Emery Wolf.
My name's Nick Lamb. And today, it's not even really about cameras today. It's, you sent me this link about the top, is it the top 15 new podcasts or top 15 podcasts?
It is the best podcasts of 2023, according to people who make podcasts.
It's like the comedian's comedian kind of.
Yeah. So they went through, it says here, hundreds of hosts, producer, executives on what they heard and what they loved this year. And yeah, they kind of made up this list. So this is from vulture.com.
So how did you find this link?
That's a great question that I do not remember an answer to.
Because I was just, you'll see this stuff sometimes, but I just wonder how people ever make their way to Vulture or, you know, those other ones.
Yeah, like I think you get like with the wrap up of the year and all that, you get all these things, you know, the best of emails, whatever. I'm sure it came through one of those and it's like, this is kind of interesting. This is going to be up Nick's alley. I'm going to send it his way.
And it was perfect. Spoiler alert, I purposely said that you should take odds and I should take evens because I was super excited about number one and I was hoping that you would like it, but we'll see. We'll get to that later.
I thought you gave it to me because it's the top 15, which means I would have 8 to listen to and you'd have 7.
No, I didn't want. I wanted you to check out number one to see if you liked it because I really liked it. So I was curious.
Cool. Well, should we jump into it?
Yeah.
All right.
So I think we should start it off though by saying podcasts take a while to get into. It's kind of like a food or you know how it's like an album that takes 4 or 5 listens before you start liking the songs. I find podcasts are kind of like that. So take this with a grain of salt, I would say, because we didn't listen to these podcasts for very long before coming up with an opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Like myself, especially, like what I've come to realize through this is I don't think I'm much of a podcast person.
No. I am. I love podcasts. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Number 15 on the list is a little podcast called Knowledge Fight. Have you ever heard of it?
I had not heard of that.
So it's this guy, Jordan Holmes and Dan Friesen. They are very animated, very talkative, which makes it kind of interesting. And, you know, they sort of take the like soup du jour of what's going on in the news and sort of head at it. And they got really high production on it. And other than that, that's all I can really say about it. It's good. It's a little bit too quick for me. It's not something I would listen to.
That was going to be my question because Bro knows his news style. Not a big fan. We've talked about that before because it's too quick. It's too, I don't know, maybe we're just old, but it seems too modern, too snappy. Never really gets to the point kind of thing, or when it does, it's got a joke in there and it cuts back to something else. Is that more what it is, or what's the too quick with this one?
It's like too radio DJ for me.
The weird sound effects are coming in and all that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, but their sound effects are like cut in news clips and like, you know, this guy said this and they'll they sit over top and like laugh at it and like, what? And it's just like this like absurd overreaction and I can't believe it, man.
I love it.
Yeah, that's that's kind of how I would explain that one. But I could definitely see like how people could get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're into like the sort of people and things that they talk about, you're probably going to dig it.
Yeah. So my number 14 I got, which was The Big Dig. Have you heard of that one?
Not at all.
Okay. So The Big Dig. Do you know what The Big Dig is?
That's going to be a reoccurring theme on here. No, I don't know what The Dig is.
No, I didn't listen to the entire. So it's basically a mini documentary where they took It's a limited amount of episodes. It's a start to finish kind of self-contained story, which seems to be the way a lot of these podcasts are going. But it's a very well produced audio documentary on the I think it's the most expensive section of highway in the United States, maybe the world or something like that. But when the interstate was going through the United States, um, when it got to Boston, there was a group of people that didn't want the houses to get destroyed. So they essentially went under. They tunneled under. Um, and it's interesting, but it was again overproduced. But the story was cool because the way that they kind of crafted the story is this guy grew up in a poor neighborhood and his grandma lost her house due to like a government project procuring or taking the land for another use, and she kind of got taken advantage of. And then when this the kid grew up and went to university and took engineering, and then when the big dig was coming through Boston where he was living, it kind of he had this kind of sentimental thing because his grandma lost his house and stood up for the people that were going to lose their place, but because he had the engineering background, could actually come up with a solution that said, no, you don't have to go through there. There's another route. And that's how it kind of happened. But
Hmm.
interesting, but the same problem. It was overproduced for my liking, but good storytelling, worth checking out. Just not my style.
You say they're going podcasts, they are going more to this documentary style. What do you mean by that?
Well, so judging by this list that you'd sent, there seemed to be a lot of that one-off mini self-contained podcasts, which I still can't wrap my head around how it makes sense, because once you build an audience, wouldn't you want to keep it? But I don't know. That seems to be what's happening.
You know, I was thinking about this today too, and thinking about I I was listening to the radio and they were talking about the end of Yellowstone and how that sort of came about. And actually, it might have been in one of the podcasts. Anyways, it was interesting to think of like, well, how does a series end, and what does it mean if a series ends, and what happens after? And that's kind of what I think these are like, and maybe that's what people are
Oh,
liking, right? It really hits that like entertainment
yeah.
market,
Yeah, it's more like a TV series, and then the network is the one that's advertising the podcast, and then they can use their podcast to advertise the next thing. Yeah, it's
right?
interesting.
And just looking at it too, the little graphic on the website here has GBH News. I think you kept saying it was like a CBC News thing, but I guess GBH is who did it, whoever they are.
Oh, did I say CBC?
But I don't know. Yeah, just
Um, it it felt CBC or BBC or what it felt very produced in that way. It felt like a large news agency was doing it, and probably was, but
yeah. The first podcast I had there, already forgotten the name of it, but it was not like this way. It's something that would continue because they're just taking the topic of the day.
okay.
Um, my next one is sort of the same thing. So I had a podcast when I seen it. I was kind of pumped for it. So it's called Bandsplain.
Sounds
Basically,
like it's right
it's
up your alley, this kind of
yeah,
podcast.
right. Like this lady sits down and she talks to all these different bands, asks them questions, like individual people, and like they'll get into like a big long conversation about something. Um, she is also very, I'm gonna say charismatic. You know, very rock and roll too. Uses all like the terminology, talks cool and stuff. So like really fits the
Nice.
mold. Um, and then too, like when whoever she has on with her, you know, they just basically they shoot the shit, and that's what comes out of it. So it's very, I'm gonna call it lowbrow, but at the same time, like you're because it's coming from the horse's mouth, like you are
Hmm.
getting, you know, a sort of look at things that you won't typically get. So I totally understand why people would tune in week to week. It's kind of fun. It's a great way to learn more about music for sure. But again, I this is where I was like, maybe I'm just not a podcast person because it just I wasn't like that into it. I might try it again later, but we'll see.
My guess is that her character comes across, and as she does more interviews, you'll kind of pick up on some quirky or fun things that her personality kind of lends to. That's my guess. Or that did she ask some pretty good questions to these people? That could be another one.
Yeah, things ranged from like some pretty, like I said, in-depth things to things that were like they have kind of like a quick question section. I actually went through a fair amount of these, but in the quick ones, they're like, "What did you last eat?" you know.
Yeah,
So yeah.
awesome. So my next one was You Must Remember This. And this one here, so they've got different segments. It seems like they're kind of going through it. So it's like, you must remember this. And it went back to, I can't remember what it went back to. The section in the Vulture article was erotic 90s, but it went back to, I think it went back to 70s, 80s, 90s. It sounds like they're going throughout history and um, naming different parts of movies is essentially what they were focused on. So this one was interesting. I'm not sure how to
Why?
even.
I'm gonna ask the question. I think everybody's wondering why erotic.
Well, the erotic. This is my own opinion because I haven't listened to enough episodes or enough of the podcast. But my own opinion on this is that they used erotic 90s for marketing purposes. It seemed very because the actual essence of the podcast, at least the what I'd heard, was it kind of had marketing to try to catch the viewer with using the erotic theme to try to draw you in, and then it went into a film class about a movie, but better than any film class you've ever been in. So
Sorry,
you
excuse me.
you remember sitting through various 101 film classes, right, where they'll break down the movie.
I actually took a comedy, romance, and musical one. So like, and that's
Yeah.
kind of, is it like along that same lines, like where they're picking like sort of these romantic comedy type movies, or it says erotic thrillers. I'm imagining that as something like Basic Instinct.
So the episode I listened to was Pretty Woman. Have you seen Pretty Woman?
Yeah.
Of course, you've probably seen Pretty Woman. Um, but this went into more detail than I've ever heard before, and more detail about the characters, who could have had the role, who was offered the role, what
Hmm.
was happening with Richard Gere's career at the time, why they took that movie. Um, Same with Julia Roberts, where her career was at, how they took the movie. Hers was a little different because it was like she got offered the part because she wasn't quite as famous as she wasn't the famous one at the time.
But
Um,
boy, did that change after that movie.
well, but this also put Richard Gere's career back on the map as well. So, because his career, according to this one, was essentially done at the time, and he was trying to kind of revive it. But then it goes into detail about each scene and what happened and how it came
So
about and
I'm
different
I'm gonna cut you
improv.
off before you get going into it. Like, did it make you appreciate Pretty Woman more?
Yes,
There you go. I think it
yes.
accomplished what it needed to do then.
But
So on a
again,
scale of 1 to Nick, did you enjoy it?
this podcast, I dislike the snappy intros and I dislike the kind of sexual marketing that it used. But once it got into it and once I got past that, it was actually it was it was pretty good. I don't know if I could recommend it, but um it's worth checking out if you're really into film, which is weird because you would never get that by the title. So I don't know, but again, it's got a lot of eyeballs using the way that the marketing that it did. So probably
Yeah, I'm
film
thinking
class 800 level course, is not going to get a lot of eyeballs. So,
Yeah, I'm thinking like if you are into like the subject again, and I think that's going to be a reoccurring theme. It's probably something for you if you're into just knowing behind the scenes stuff about movies.
hmm
It's
yeah,
probably
this
good.
would be a good one. I don't know if I could get into it because the, I feel like I'd have to fast forward 20 minutes into the podcast to get into the movie each time, which maybe might be worth it. Maybe I'll go through and find some movies that they've got that I like that I kind of want to know more about. That could be another way I'd use that particular podcast.
Hmm. Um, the next one I have, number 11 on the list, The 13th Step. Uh,
I never heard of this one either.
yeah, it's kind of interesting. So it's a another host, and they talk about like different sexual misconduct stuff. Again, if you're into those sort of stories and you want to hear them, it's probably pretty good for you. It's actually like, and so it's the host, she's very knowledgeable, and then we'll have guests on, and the guests go through their stories, and the stuff can be like pretty interesting, right? Especially if you're into it. But other than that, it's also pretty well done. Like everything sounds good. I'm
So,
pretty
what
sure the
kind of
guests are sitting
stories
with her.
is this? I don't quite get like what's the overall theme or what's kind of tying everything together with the podcast.
Uh, Women that have gone through abuse and are they're telling
Oh,
those stories. Yeah.
oh, this is a heavy. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. Like
Wow.
it got heavy in a hurry in one episode. It's funny too. Like again, probably not something I would listen to personally, but like every one of these podcasts, I listen to one full podcast at least, and then would follow up just sort of going through a couple others to see if it was similar. So,
hmm
but yeah. Anyways, that's the
Um,
13th step. Again, if it's in your scope of things that you like, it'll be for you.
the next one, number 10 on the list, was Wait for It with Ronald Young Jr. And the the picture, so the little thumbnail, it looks like like somebody, it feels like a weight loss ad where it's got somebody that's, it doesn't look really overweight, looks kind of fit, and it seems like you kind of, just by looking at the thumbnail, you get the picture of this guy that's probably going to teach you some great weight loss tips.
Yeah, and wait
But
for it. It's WEIGHT.
yes, thank you. But this was the surprise of the podcast list, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Um, this guy knows how to podcast. He's just got, I don't even, he's got a winning personality and it comes across in the podcast, and he's very vulnerable about his story, which at first I wouldn't have a ton of interest in following somebody's kind of journey of weight and uncomfortableness with that and trying to figure out life. But he's so good at storytelling and crafting his story and making that emotional connection and having his personality come across. This is one I'm going to come back to. It's a good one. It's spoiler alert, it's the winner of the podcast from all the ones that I'd heard. It's worth a listen, really good. Just based on him. He's really, really good.
I'm guessing too, like it's sort of the things he goes through. Are they like really relatable? Like you could understand them, or you've experienced them from maybe not from a weight loss perspective, but maybe something else in your life type thing.
Yes, he puts that into perspective. So one little story that he tells is he follows these kind of Instagram people, but he'll follow these weight, like the, I don't know the correct terminology, but the heavier influencers. And then he was following these influencers, and then in the one picture they showed this female influencer and they showed her boyfriend, and he was like, but her boyfriend wasn't a heavier person, was like this skinny dude that was in really good shape and stuff. And he was just like, the way he crafted the story of saying, I finally felt like I'd found people that I could relate to and understand and that I could connect to. And then I saw this and I realized I still didn't have a chance with women because of my weight. It was just a great way of telling the story. Yes, they're relatable, but he's great. He's a fabulous podcaster.
Well, I might check it out too. It actually kind of sounds all right. Number 9 on the list is a podcast called The Town. So this is a entertainment podcast. It's talking about things in Hollywood or whatever. It actually sounds like they have a really good hand on the pulse of Hollywood and what's going on. Um, Again, another, it's a host with guests coming on and telling their things and going through stuff. I was like,
This is funny because we got two totally different things. It feels like you got kind of newsy updates and
yeah,
guests, and mine is just like people telling their own stories and
well,
stuff. That's interesting.
that's all right though. But this one too, like I was actually like, this is another one I was disappointed in. Like where I was
Oh,
just
really?
like, yeah, I don't know. Had higher expectations and I thought again, like, oh, this is going to be like kind of some cool stuff about Hollywood. And, they even did like this award section thing, like where they handed out their awards for the year. And I'm like, this is stupid. And then 2 episodes later, they were talking about the Golden Globes and how stupid they were. In Chichiro. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was another one that I was like, just like, I wanted more out of it, and it wasn't again something that I would listen to. But again, great pulse on it. If you're deeply into the movie industry and you're deeply into like Hollywood LA culture, you'd probably love this.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we won't get you to do their promos or anything like that.
No.
So number 8 on their list was Classy with Jonathan. I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. Menjivar. I should have listened to the episode back before
This
this,
is
but
also a reoccurring trend for Nick.
yeah,
We get
that's my life.
yeah, a little backstory when we're working with the Pats, we throw up these facts about players, and we always get Nick to read them off because as camera people out in the field, we actually don't know what they're saying. We're putting the person up, but we have no idea what is going on. So we like the extra little tidbits. So we force Nick to read them to us, and always trying to pronounce names. It's like everybody's just on edge waiting for
It's
him to do
tricky.
it.
So this one here was more interview style. They had guests on, but he did it in an interesting way where he would craft a story and then they'd go do something. At least the episode I listened to, they went out for supper, but then it it went over the top. I don't mind the podcast that they're talking and then the person does a dialogue after. So if we were going to do that, me and you would be talking and then I would cut back and say, um, at this moment, Emery and I forgot to discuss cameras, but the one camera that's always on my mind is the Canon C200 or whatever. You know how they do that all the time and then they set up what they're talking about and then they go to the next thing. It felt like they would speak 2 sentences and then they would do a dialogue about it and then 2 more sentences and then more dialogue. And it just made it feel too overproduced for me and wasn't my style. There's a reason why it's on this list. Like it was good, but um not for me, and I couldn't really tell you what it was much more about it because it didn't really stick with me. So I don't know.
You remember when we talked to Justin and he was talking about when him and Justin Greg just started up and how when he was doing videos, he was like, adding jump cuts in, even though he could just say, because he thought that's just what you do, because that's what
Hmm.
people were doing. That's kind of what that tactic feels like to me as well.
It does. And I'm not opposed to it. So there's a podcast on my top 5 podcasts that does it a lot, but there's a when it gets overused, yes, just too many jump cuts.
Number 7 on the list, This American Life. It was actually 2 of them, so I had 9, not even 8, Nick.
Oh,
And then
there's
Slate's
2
What's
there.
Next. Yeah. So, do you know what? I'm gonna focus on This American Life.
Hmm.
Slate wasn't really my thing. This American Life was actually probably my top 1, top 2.
Was Ira Glass hosting the episode you listened to?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I actually listened to a couple of them. Um, but basically, it's just like a news reported story. It's really well researched. It's kind of they were all unique stories. They were interesting things to listen to, and you got everything wrapped up by the end of it. So it was a nice, neat little package. It
Did it hit you in the heart? I found when I was listening to This American Life, they would usually do that.
no.
They didn't do that? Okay. You don't have a heart though.
Yeah.
It
Maybe
wasn't emotional, like you
it
didn't
was the
feel the
particular
emotion.
stories I listened to or something, but yeah, but like I said, I thought it was really, again, a bit maybe overproduced, like you said. They do the same cutaways and stuff like that too. They're cutting in, inserts of different news things and stuff like that as well. But all in all together, when you get when you got to the end of it, it was just one good story in like a little package. And kind of did feel like, you're watching like a little mini series, and it all wraps up by the end of it. So yeah,
Mm,
I actually did enjoy this one. I'll probably maybe listen to some more.
okay. Well, yeah, we'll have to make a note of the ones that we'll listen to. But yes, I've listened to This American Life before, and Ira Glass is one of the best hosts. So yeah,
I know the
worth a
name
listen.
too. I don't know why I know the name though.
He's a storyteller for sure.
Hmm.
Um, he's done This American Life on TV before. Yeah, he's really good. My next one was Hang Up. Have you ever heard of Hang Up at all?
No, but I'm
It
looking at the graphic. That's
it
fantastic. The 80s.
okay. This was the first I couldn't get through the whole episode of this. This one was just not my style at all. It was a dating game show where they would do, but it was video or audio dates. So they would go on a date with this person and ask them questions, but it was game show style.
Were they just like
And
random people calling in?
well, so they would, it wasn't just calling in because it was a podcast, but they didn't use their real names. So they had it set up so that if they ever ran into each other in real life, they wouldn't theoretically know who they were. They wouldn't be able to connect. You couldn't connect any of this together. So if they didn't win the date, there was no way that they would ever be able to connect.
Hmm.
Was how it was set up. And then they could hang up on the person if they didn't, if something, I don't even know the whole premise. I didn't like it. It was too much sound effects, too much of this. It felt like a crappier version of a reality TV show,
Which
but
is
yet,
already crappy.
yeah,
I
it
like,
was a lot of work. Whoever put this together, it was a lot of work.
yeah, I
And
like the idea. I like the effort, right? I think it's
yeah,
funny, right? And especially in this day and age.
and I think that if you were in that scene, so I think I'm just too old for this podcast, to be honest with you.
If you were 20
So
something and dating, like this would be
yeah,
totally up your alley.
yeah. So not for me, but there was a lot of effort, more effort than we're putting into this. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Number 5 for me was the Ezra Klein show. Obviously, Ezra is your host, and he goes through a whole pile of different things. Honestly, don't have a whole pile to say about this. Seemed like other things, but didn't enjoy it as much as like This American Story.
Okay. I've got no questions on it. Looks like a person standing on the thing, according to the thumbnail.
Your
The
next,
person just
your,
there. My next one.
I'm
Oh,
kind of
sorry.
interested in this next one of yours.
Ghost
Sounds
story.
interesting.
So this was a pretty good one. And this person could craft a story. So this was a good podcaster, a good. Oh, my cat wants up. And a good, interesting story. Well done. I would say more worth checking out. Oh, where are you going?
Just
Okay,
let her be.
okay, you can
Just
go wherever there, kitty
straight
cat.
butt in the camera. That's what you go to YouTube for, kids.
um, this one here, so they did their ghost story on their house that they grew up in, but then his wife also knew the house, or the person that was murdered in the house was actually their grandma. But it
It's so good. Not
um
quite as good as Ryan's cats, but pretty decent.
it's a good podcast. There's now it's in front of my light. um Sorry, I got too distracted there. Anyways, it's one worth checking out in the group. I'm not a ghost story person because it's a little too scary for me, but
I kind of like the paranormal, so it might be something I check out.
yeah, if you're into that, this would be, I think, one of the better ones. So
Number 3 on the list is one called "You Didn't See Nothin," and this is would be my other one or two. So it's this again another like journalism based one, extremely well researched, but the guy also like puts everything in the story into his own, or at least everyone I listen to into like his own story. Um, and he's talking about like lots of black rights in Chicago. Um, I can't remember the sort of era, but he starts off the whole thing like, this kid, this story was happening, and I remember we were on the streets and all these things, and tells these stories back and forth. But like the information's great, the storytelling's great.
mm,
Um, and yeah, like I said, out of the other ones I listened to, it's one of the ones that I enjoyed the most.
you didn't see nothing. I'll have to check that one out. Interesting. Number 2 on the list, the Retrievals. This one was a little too heavy for me. I it was good, but it was very heavy. It was getting into um uh I can't even, I'm blanking on the word, but where you're trying to have children
Mhm.
and you're seeking treatment for it, and good storytelling, a well done podcast, but just too heavy for me when I'm just driving somewhere and want to listen to a podcast. But yeah, if you're wanting a really heavy podcast that
Because that's what
uh,
everybody wants, I think. I don't know.
I don't know, not for me, but um, you know, it's on number 2 because somebody liked it. But yeah,
Number 1 search engine is the last one. It's the one I had, the one you were excited about for me for
yeah.
some reason. It was funny. We were talking about it the other night. I literally knew nothing about it, so just went into this, and you're like, "How was it?" And I was like, "Meh." But yeah, another like I'm gonna call it news one, but it's not really news. Like they basically pick like one subject and go into it hard. It's entertaining. How they piece everything together is kind of interesting, and they'll have guests on that can speak to specific things of whatever their episode's about. Again, I think if you're really interested in the subject, it would be a really good one. It just wasn't subjects I was interested in, I think.
So search engine was PJ Votes from Reply All, his previous podcast, And the thing that I loved about Reply All was they would take tech heavy subject stuff you couldn't just find online just by Googling and stuff like that. So that's kind of where search engine picks up on, but it's just PJ Vogt. And I just really like PJ as a podcaster. So maybe that's the acquired taste we were talking about. And it takes a few episodes to kind of get into his style and personality and little kind of works about him. But I really like him. I think he's great.
You wanted to talk about your top 5.
Yeah. Do you have a top 5?
No, I basically only have the 2 I like.
Okay. Like, do you have your own? So, what would you listen to if you're listening to a podcast?
I don't know
Or
if
you
I
don't?
know like exactly if I could articulate what I'm looking for. What I did do though was I came up with like 5 things. We'll see if I actually remember them of like why people were maybe listening to these or why, experts would talk about these things. So the number one thing, all of them were extremely well researched.
Mm-hmm.
These top 5 things are also going to seem like things that could improve our podcast. We don't do them.
That's probably true. Yep.
Number 2, they all essentially had guests.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it wasn't a guest, it was something else, another story, news clips that they could use to push it along. So it was never
Yeah.
one person or just a host, just like
Yeah.
we're doing right now. It was never this.
Or the other podcasts that I like have at least 3 people. Because once you get that third or fourth person in there, it kind of creates this banter that you don't get with just 2.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to bring a third person on.
Matt Howard.
Yeah. Would he come
I,
on? You think he'd?
I actually texted him tonight. He couldn't do it, but
So this is the problem: is every time we text Matt, he can't do it.
he's
But the other,
he's an important guy doing important things.
yeah. You know what we should do? So this is what we should do is we should get either Matt or Ryan, and whoever is available. So we text Matt. If he's not available, get Ryan, and Ryan comes on. But Ryan needs to get a mic because a podcast, you need 3 good mics, I think.
Search engine wasn't doing that. And when you read the thing, like uh Ryan was saying, actually we were talking about Ryan. We were talking to Ryan about this, and he was saying that his old one was like the most popular one at one point. So they were actually making money, and so they kind of talk about like how this podcast is trying to make money and appeal to the masses and get everything going for podcasts again. But yeah, like they had guests that definitely didn't have mics and were probably doing Zoom things or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's necessary.
Not necessary, but it'd be nice.
With
But
that
Ryan's
said,
got 1,000 mics, so
yeah,
he can
with that
figure that
said,
out.
my third point was high production value. Like for the most part, a lot of them were 2 people sitting in a room. So you
Mm-hmm.
had 2 good mics, you had 2 good pickups and all that stuff. And the cuts, the editing, the news clips in, the music with it and things like that. So that was the number 3 thing. The number 4 was for lack of a better term, personality, charisma, whatever you want to call it, the people, your main person or main people, they have it through the teeth. They each have their character. They know what it is. They push it hard. Some of it could get, a little bit outlandish at times, but which is fine. Like you said, when I was talking about the Bandsplain person, um, with over time, you probably just pick up on that character and it's fine. But that's also like sort of a negative in my mind as well. Because like when we're on here, we're not playing characters. It's just us
No,
talking. And
this is a different one.
yeah,
This is not meant to be popular.
yeah.
Like,
The 2 I liked didn't seem like characters, right? And I think that's why I like them.
Yeah, the popular version of this would be us doing little funny 20-second bits on cameras and um the guy, so the 20-second bit would be you sit down with the camera, you've read the manual, the person knows the all the menus inside out, they show up on set for their shoot and they forget where the power button is, they can't even turn the camera on. Like, that's a funny video right there.
Except I didn't laugh at all. Anyways, yeah, I had a fifth thing. I cannot remember it off the top of my head, but like I said, I think, you're talking about a top five. Those are the things that I think appealed to me, or at least I found was like a coincidence amongst all these things. And that's probably why other podcasters are listening to these ones.
Yeah, I agree. The production value was very high, and I PJ might have had some guests on that didn't have good quality audio, but I think he would be the exception to that
Yep.
for sure. Um, so do you want me to go through my top five podcasts, or I maybe misunderstood what I was going to do here, but I made my own list separate from this list?
Yeah, I was giving you freedom to do whatever you want.
Okay.
Like you take your top five and you run with it. I
Yeah.
don't have a top five. I don't care what happens.
Okay. I'm gonna tell you my top five and let me know if any of these interest you.
I,
This is
I
my
I'm
literal.
just excited to finally hear the top five. I feel like we've been talking
Okay.
for a top
We've been
5 minutes.
talking about this top 5 minutes. Okay. So this is not even tailored for you. The first top five has something to do with us and cameras, and
First
it's
top
number.
five. How many top
Well,
fives?
no, no, the first in the top five. So it's technically number five. So number five is 99% Invisible, which is a show about design. And there's no YouTube version of this show. There's no visual component to the show. It's literally a podcast about design. And they just craft their story around the design of a building or a freeway and why design is important and how it affects our lives. But they just do a great job of saying it and telling the story, and worth a listen. And it's what's kind of funny about us doing a video podcast, because you're trying to figure out a way to capture what's important about a camera and get these different guests on to explain their photographs from an audio format. So they do a better job than we do, but it's a good one. My number four, Dark Knight Diaries. Have you heard of that one?
Darknet?
Yeah, Darknet Diaries.
I have not.
So Darknet
Oh
Diaries
crap! Do you
is
know what? I
a
think a lady at work listens to this.
okay. It's very heavy on computer hacking, and he essentially, I don't know how he gets his guests, because he gets guests that have hacked absurd things and multiple millions of dollars and tens of millions of dollars
Reddit.
of but like literal theft, like where they've stolen this amount of money through hacking and
Yeah, but
hacked crazy stuff.
it's probably all anonymous, right? Like you can't.
Well, it seems like he's using real names and facts, and these people have already been to jail. Maybe
Oh,
that's
okay,
it,
okay.
that they're already out of jail or they've been, but it's absurd, and it really makes you what his kind of mission behind it is. He's interested in hacking and stuff, but he's also kind of saying, pay attention to your passwords and what information you're giving out online and stuff like that. So he's kind of bringing attention to stuff that you don't really think about on a daily basis, but his stories, his interviews, he's always got an interview with usually with one person, and then he jumps back in time and sets it up. But it's not overproduced to the point of nausea like some of these podcasts. Well done though, worth a listen. I know a couple people that listen to it for sure.
Ooh, and he's got t-shirts.
My number three. My number three, I think you would like it, but dude, he'd probably drive you crazy at the same time. It's the BS Report. Have you heard that one with Bill Simmons? It's a sports podcast. But he does sports podcasting from more of a fan perspective. So he's got his teams. He makes you aware of his bias up front. And
So the BS report is done.
no,
It's looking like it. So there's that Bill Simmons report
I could.
archive from 2007 to 15, and then it's looking like The Ringer is maybe his new one.
Oh, it's the Bill Simmons podcast. Is his new one? Sorry, I've got the wrong podcast. It's the Bill Simmons podcast. BS Report was his old. It's the same podcast, just a different network.
Yeah.
Good catch though. Yeah, the Bill Simmons podcast. And he kind of gets his cast. So he'll usually open up with, so if there was a big trade, he'll sometimes do a 10 or 20 minute kind of monologue on the trade by himself. And then he'll bring in his guests. And he's always got a guest, but it's a recurring cast of characters. So he always brings in his buddy from college who tends to drink too much. And then he always brings in his buddy that knows football, but was really good with the numbers and kind of is super smart on it. And his buddy on basketball. And then he's got he's got Doc Rivers, the coach, the old coach always comes on and does his thing. It interesting, and it kind of gets you caught up on what's happening in sports as well. So I like it for that too.
No hockey though.
So he was into hockey. He had Kings season tickets for a few years, and it was more hockey focused, his podcast then. But he kind of let his Kings tickets lapse and rarely talks about hockey now. He could never figure out hockey. So his theory on
Americans.
hockey was honestly couldn't figure it out because his take on because he couldn't understand the thing that baffled him and he hated about hockey was how 8 seeds could regularly beat 1 seeds. So he essentially said that hockey was random and that any team could win at any time.
No, because it's a true team sport. What kind of moron doesn't get that?
So
Like
this is good.
You can't just, put LeBron on your team and win championships. Like yeah.
So his argument against that was, well, how come these 1 seeds are not always, but regularly getting beat by an 8 seed?
Yeah, it's because it's a team sport. Like McDavid is the best player in the world, period, and the Oilers still lose. You put that to basketball, it doesn't translate. Football,
Mm-hmm.
I think, is a great team sport. Not like I will never say anything bad about football. I think it's between hockey and football the greatest sports in the world. But yeah, it's a true team sport, and that's your simple answer. If the entire team is doing well from line 1 to 4, you're going to win hockey games, regardless of where you're placed.
Yeah. And so his take, being more of a basketball football guy, was that he put a lot of emphasis on the goalie. He couldn't get past the goalie. Like he felt like a random goalie would get hot, which I kind of disagree with.
Kind of true, kind of not, right? Though.
But you're right. I guess a goalie can get hot.
You look at the Vancouver Canucks this year. The whole team's playing well, but Demko's stats are through the roof, even for Demko, and he's a great goalie. But when you look statistically, what the Canucks are doing shouldn't have happened, and right now the team is faltering because they're actually coming back to reality instead of having bloated stats.
And is his goalie stats getting worse?
It's leveling out, and that's
They're
all that's
leveling out.
happening.
Okay.
And it's the same thing. Again, Oiler fan. So the Oilers stuff is just leveling out right now. So
Um,
they're on the other end of Vancouver. We're coming up from the bottom, but leveling out.
so the other thing that is kind of a lot of people do this now, but I love so he does a lot of fake trades and imagines one player on another team, and he's quite well connected now. So I think at the start he was just making up a lot of crap,
Hmm.
but now it's really interesting because he'll float something out there and you'll almost think it's just this made up thing. And then a week later, the trade happens. It's eerily similar to what he just floated out. So he's got some inside information on it, but
Yeah,
didn't really say it.
trading another player to another team. That's exactly what I think about with this podcast all the time.
Fair enough.
Sorry, Nick. What's the next podcast?
So the next one, I guarantee you've never heard of, is Hamish and Andy. They're comedy duo, and but just like how I said, none of the podcasts. Well, I shouldn't say none, but uh, very few have just two people. Hamish and Andy, comedy duo, but they often get Jack, their kind of producer slash sound mixer type guy, in on the conversation. And the thing that they do, I don't even know how to describe their humor, but Hamish is just an improv, almost literal genius where he can make any situation funny and it's just fun to listen to.
Yeah, they do a bunch of video too. It looks like.
Yeah, yeah, they do a bunch of video. Podcast, I would say, is their main thing, but they also do TV shows and video. And so Andy's kind of the normal guy that just kind of sets up Hamish for the bits where Hamish will be absurd and you'll be normal. They've got a bunch of recurring bits that they'll each year or each season there'll be a theme that they kind of fall into throughout the year, and then they'll keep recurring the jokes back to that theme. And yeah, extremely funny. One of the funniest podcasts out there. But this is also the taste thing. You couldn't listen to just one episode because it might not be that funny yet. But once you listen to two or three, all of a sudden it's just hilarious.
So I always think this is funny. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it here before too, but like I like comedy. I think the more we're laughing, more fun things are. Um, out of all the movies I watch and stuff, that's like probably the majority of them. But like you were really into comedy. This is what always like amazes me. Like you have these little like, oh, you should listen to this comedy podcast. And like that never crossed my mind at all at any point.
This is so this podcast, I wait for it. Like this is probably this one and my number one are the two podcasts that I look forward to. This is a podcast that when it comes out, it's going to be up next in my listening. Um, it's the it can turn your day around as far as I'm concerned.
So
This comedy stuff
out
because
of
it's that funny.
out of us two, which one's Hamish and which one's Andy?
So, well, I wouldn't do. So this is what Andy does really well. Andy starts every episode off. He gets it rolling. If Hamish did not have Andy, he would not know what to say, and the show wouldn't move on. He would get distracted with something and just it would not be funny because he does not he could not carry a show on his own.
Uh,
So
yeah.
I'm not as funny as Hamish by any means. But you would be Andy because Andy does the majority of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, he pushes the show forward, like going, "Cool, Nick. That's 4 podcasts now. So which is the number one podcast?"
So one more thing about Hamish and Andy.
I imagine Hamish just derails things all the time too.
He just derails us. So Andy, so picture this. I don't even know if this is going to come across as funny in one bit, but so Andy's a very kind of straight-laced type of person. He's the kind of guy that likes everything in order and neat and tidy. He hates celebrating his birthday. So anytime his birthday comes up, he's just like, yeah, whatever. I just, I don't even celebrate it. So Hamish for years gets people to call in and they'll leave messages wishing him a happy birthday. So every time somebody calls in, they're like, "Hey, happy birthday, Andy." He's like, "It's not my birthday. I don't celebrate birthdays." And then Hamish also, he started the rumor that Andy smokes, but he doesn't smoke at all. He's like the last person on the planet that would smoke. And so he's always people are always phoning in trying to get Andy to give up the cigs.
I'm looking at the image on the website and they've got their little iPhone earbud things, and one's the left and the right. Do they do that? Like, does one person talk in the left ear and the other the right?
No,
That'd be amazing.
it would be annoying.
I would feel like you're getting an actual conversation.
Oh, you could. Yeah, I see what you're saying. No, that's just a marketing thing that they did.
Nice. I still like the idea. Anyways, what's the number one podcast
the number
I
one
should check out?
Podcast. Well, you shouldn't check this one out. The one you should check out is Hamish and Andy. This one you should not check out because you would not like it. You wouldn't get it. You would turn it off. I don't even think you'd make it through 20 seconds. It's the Secret Cabal Gaming Podcast. It is my favorite show. It's about board games. It's got 5 characters. They're all characters, and they basically talk about board games, but they are buddies from way back, and they've got the funny guy who's always cracking jokes. They've got the guy that they always make fun of, who they call an alien brain. They've got the intellectual nerd that's always kind of right about everything. They've got the uber board gamer that's always into the latest board game, and they've got their host that kind of carries the whole show. But it's great. Love it. Look forward to every episode. You'll hate it. I'm
glad you recommended it to me.
You should listen to 4 minutes of an episode just to laugh at me, but that's about it. You would never go back to it. I don't know why.
Well, there you have it, folks. A podcast about podcasts. I'm sure that's exactly what you wanted today. It's what you needed in your life. But there's, I think, probably 20 good options there we gave you after Nick's miraculous 5 that he gave you. Although I don't know why we're listening to the last one, but whatever. There's 20. Actually, 20.
There's 0 video podcasts in this whole thing, except for mine. Maybe number 5. 99% Invisible could kind of be one.
Yeah, and really the only podcast you should listen to is Just Two Camera Guys. Check it out on your favorite podcast streaming station or on YouTube too. We're a lot of fun. Anyways, that's all the time we got for today. Don't know why I'm saying that. Never say it, but have a great night or a great day or whatever you're having. Make sure it's great.
We're so out of time. I don't even have time to be here right now. Remember when you were all excited about that lens?
Which lens?
Oh my goodness, what one was it? Was it the 70-200? The 2.8? Well, you wanted to buy it. Which lens did you want to buy? You were crazy. You wanted to buy a lens. Like, you couldn't get the lens off your mind.
I don't buy any lens right now.
Okay, well, anyways, I want to buy a laser cutter right now. Can't get it off my mind. Oh, man.
Hey, look who made it.
Can't hear you, though. Oh, boy.
Oh, boy,
yeah, let me
Nick.
throw up my audio.
Come on, man.
Audio, sure. My microphone, speaker, headphones. There we go. All right. So mine didn't record. Oh, boy. You recorded.
Hopefully.